Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, where we help new and beginning teachers navigate through those crazy first years of teaching so you can maintain your sanity and personal life. Here's your host, Kim Lepre.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kim Lepre, and this is the podcast for new and beginning teachers who don't want to just survive those first few years, but actually thrive. Hey guys, guess what? This is episode 100! Oh my gosh, so crazy. I know, and it's taken me so long to get here because of that long hiatus, but hey, we're at episode 100, and this is a really special moment for me. I want you to know that I am so grateful for those of you that have been with me since last year, or even, this year, if you just started listening this year, even after I took the hiatus. I'm really grateful for you and for your emails and your comments that you leave, especially in the Facebook group. It really kept me going, I'm not going to lie. If I hadn't gotten so much feedback from you in the DMs and Instagram or my Facebook group or emails, I might not have come back, but I really felt like there was a need for me to come back. And I really felt like, I didn't want to let you guys down. And I kind of got over myself in terms of like, I have nothing to share. This year has been so confusing for me as well. But I think that's actually something that some of you wanted to hear from a veteran teacher, that it kind of sucks for us too, and that it's not all amazing. Don't get me wrong, I have a pretty good handle of what I'm doing in the classroom, but at the same time, it's not the same, and I'm not enjoying it as much as I would have enjoyed it in person. In any case, for episode 100, I did want to talk about something really important that I think that whether you're a new teacher or you're a veteran teacher, that you need to think about and live by for this upcoming semester, because we're about to go into second semester. We're about to go into 2021 at the time of this recording. And that idea is grace. I want you guys to have some grace and empathy for yourself. And I know that sounds weird. You're like, empathy for myself? Yes, I want you to stop talking to yourself in a way that you would never talk to somebody else. I want you to stop having unreasonable expectations for yourself that you would never dare have for somebody else. It's really frustrating for me when I read comments from parents in different Facebook groups about how they think that teachers aren't holding their weight, that teachers aren't doing a very good job. I remember a time not too long ago when parents were saying that teachers should make $1 million because they realize how hard it is to do our job. And then not too long after that, everybody became an expert on how we should do our job. And I want you to know that nobody knows how to do your job better than you. Even if you're a brand new teacher, even if you're a student teacher, no one knows how to do your job your way better than you. And I want you guys to give yourself some grace. I want you to stop being hard on yourself because it sucks right now and it's difficult and some of your students aren't participating. You have a long list of D's and F's that you never had before. I want you to give yourself some grace. And it's the same grace that you give your students who don't have ideal home situations, who don't have a place for them to study, who live in a very cramped apartment and have to deal with noise and watching little babies while trying to go to your class. I want you to give yourself that kind of grace. And another thing I want you to do is to stop having the same expectations for yourself and for your kids that you did pre-pandemic. I'm sure you've heard this before, so I want to say it again in case you forgot. You can't expect your kids to do exactly the same thing that they were able to do when we were face-to-face in an ideal teaching situation. You just can't. So ask yourself, what do these kids need to know in my grade, in my subject right now that will help them be fully functioning citizens as adults? And you might say, but I teach third grade. Yeah, third grade is an important grade because it teaches them everything they need to know for fourth grade and beyond. So what seed can you plant right now so that they will be fully functioning adults someday? What part are you going to contribute to that? Do they really need to know everything that you normally do in order to function as an adult? I mean, really? Do my students really need to know what a simile and a metaphor is so that they can pay their taxes and fill out a job application? Am I going to sit and freak out because I didn't have time to teach figurative language to the extent that I normally do? Absolutely not. I taught them the things that they need if they were all of a sudden to be thrust into the world, what they would need to survive, such as reading, writing, and analyzing. That's what I'm focusing on right now. And I think it's really saving not only my sanity, but also that of my students, because we're doing things that seem to have purpose. At this time, there's just no room or mental bandwidth for fluff or anything erroneous at this point. So just focus on what matters. Focus on the basics. Focus on what you can affect right now that will make you feel like you accomplished something. If I can get my students to write better than they did when they came in, that's amazing. I feel like I've accomplished so much, and it's progress and not perfection. And next year, when my new 7th graders come in, I know that they're only going to have X, Y, and Z as skills. I don't expect them to come in as the typical 7th graders from years past. This whole idea of our kids are falling behind. Behind what? If everyone is falling behind, are we all in the same place? And behind is a standard that we've placed based on what we've always done in the past. Well, we kind of have to rewrite those expectations. And so the theme of my podcast and what I want you to consider as maybe your mantra or, word of the year for 2021 is grace. Give yourself some grace, give your students some grace, and move forward with grace and dignity. And stop beating yourself up over things that really don't matter and don't move the needle and in no way define who you are as a teacher.
I'm Jeff Eichler.
And I'm Kirsten Rickert, and we are the hosts of the Getting Unstuck podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
So for my 100th episode, I wanted to bring you something super duper valuable. I brought in a former guest on my podcast, Brandie Rosen, and she came in on episodes 97 and 98 to talk about how gen ed teachers can support SPED students, as well as actionable strategies for new special education teachers. And a question that I've received quite a bit has to do with how do we support our SPED students during the pandemic? And how has the IEP process been affected by distance learning? So I wanted to bring back Brandie on this because she's definitely an expert, especially when it comes to the IEP process. In fact, she has this amazing program on how to make that easy. I think I just felt some ears perk up from my SPED teachers in the audience. You're like, what do you mean IEP process easy? Do you mean I can actually get my afternoons and my evenings and my weekends back? Absolutely. So in this interview, Brandie and I cover so much. Be sure you stick all the way to the end so that you can learn more about Brandie's program, because it would be the perfect time to go through this program before second semester so that you can start fresh and ready with some tools under your belt. Here's my interview with Brandie. Well, thank you so much, Brandie, for being back on the podcast again. I love having you here.
Thanks so much for being here. It's fun.
Now, for those of my listeners that haven't heard from you before, can you tell us a little bit about your teaching experience and how you came to your current position?
Sure, absolutely. I have been in special education for almost 30 years. I started out as a special ed teacher working with students with emotional and behavioral disorders, as well as autism. And that's really where primarily my teaching experience has been, with a mixture of other kinds of kids, but that's really kind of been my passion. And so I did that. And then eventually I moved into being a behaviorist with a school district and kind of developing behavioral programs and working with students with kind of more severe behaviors. And then moved into an administrative role, which included a lot of IEPs, writing IEPs, going to IEPs, facilitating IEPs. And then, during that and continuing to the present, I spend a lot of my time training and mentoring new teachers, which I absolutely love. And, training them in all areas of classroom management and IEPs and really anything that comes their way in those first, 2 to 3 years of teaching.
Right. Yeah. And, a lot of teachers right now, both SPED and gen ed teachers, they're struggling with knowing how to support students via distance learning. It's kind of top of everyone's mind, even though we've been doing this since last March, last April. It's still a huge concern. And, I remember when I was teaching in the classroom in person, I was able to do a lot of one-on-one work with my students. I can't do that now. And I'm sure you've come across some different ways that teachers have handled that. And maybe you have some ideas of your own. So what have you found to be the most effective?
Well, I think to start off, I think the most important message that needs to get out there is that this, though I'm tired of hearing the word, is unprecedented. We're in a time that there are no right answers because we've never been here. So this is all just practice, right? And so I think that teachers, just by nature, we're always really hard on ourselves, and we, push and push and push. And so I think a lot of people, get to a place where even though what they're doing is supportive and reasonable, they know it's not the best, right? It's not as good as it could be if we were in person. It's not. I mean, that's the reality, is that a lot of this is not going to be as good. And when you're working with kids with special needs, there's so many other variables that come into play. And so we can't control that. And and nothing about that statement do I like to say or hear, is that we can't control it. So a lot of what we already do as teachers works both virtually and in person. And especially, when you're working with a student with special needs, there are some things that just have to be done or they can't learn. So, breaking assignments down into smaller parts, going slower, taking some of that one-to-one time. All of that is going to be just as important as it is, in person when you're doing virtual learning. So that's super helpful for kids. A lot of the struggles that kids are having right now really is around kind of organization, access, things like that. So on top of maybe the learning that's a struggle, they're trying to keep up with how do you turn in the work and how do you log into all these different places and where do you turn it in? And this teacher, wants me to do it this way and this teacher wants me to do it this way. And, it's just a lot. So a lot of what we're doing as special ed teachers right now is just kind of keeping kids on the rails, just kind of keeping kids where they need to be. So that's, I think, super important to remember. And then, again, for all kids, but I think especially with kids with special needs, we have to really focus on that, social emotional piece, the mental health piece, the anxiety, the fear, all of that that is around all of our kids, and make that the priority. So if they don't get the assignment done, they don't get the assignment done. It's if you're weighing, them having a complete meltdown or maybe taking an extra day, we want to give them an extra day. I would say that's true for all kids. And so I think that's really important as special ed teachers. A lot of times for these kids, the special ed class and the special ed teacher is their safe zone. It always has been. And so they've not only lost, school and all the other things that they're used to, but they've kind of lost that connection with their teacher that is so important. So I think all of that is really, really important to remember. And then at the same time, being gentle with yourself and knowing that there's just only so much that can get done in a day. And, one last piece of that, from the beginning, I've encouraged my teachers, take what you already do and put it into a virtual setting as best as you can. Instead of what a lot of us were doing was trying to create an entire virtual school. Right? Like changing everything and making it a virtual school. And I was like, this is going to end again, right? We're going to be back in school. Don't do that. Nobody should have to create an entire school just to be able to make it through this time. So take what you already know and then just adapt it and change it and do, do what we as especially special ed teachers do is, just go with it, switch it up, see what you can do to make it work. So I think a lot of that, once we get out of our own head about it, a lot of that works virtually too.
And I think that strategies that have always been used with special ed students, like the chunking, writing down the directions, even chunking directions, I think they're just such great practices during virtual learning, because in person, I can verbally give instructions. I can maybe put, a couple of words on the board to show what they're supposed to be doing. But I feel like virtually you have to actually write it out in complete sentences, because you have the student who's distracted, who didn't hear you, and they're not going to raise their virtual hand to ask you, what did you just say? They don't have the same kind of comfort with doing that because they don't know their classmates. They may not have even shown their camera the entire year so far. And so for them to raise their hand and say, I didn't catch what we're doing, I think that the things that I learned when I taught special ed really transfer so much in the online learning environment.
Yeah, I think that is one of the advantages for us, is that we do have the ability, especially in a special ed classroom, even virtually, to slow down, to break things down, to do things a little bit differently, and take this time to teach the kids, what do you do if you missed it? This is a safe place, right? So what do you do if you missed it? And then what organization system does work for you, right? So if you know that it's all going to be written up, on the comments of your Zoom, how can you get that information quicker? So one of the things that we've been working with a lot of our kids is to use their phones to take pictures of anything that's up on the screen, because it does move fast and, usually faster than our kids can do, which is just the same as we sometimes teach our kids. Like if, a teacher writes on the whiteboard the homework, take a picture of it if you have access to that, if that's easier for you, So all of those things, teaching, what works for them and what can they do to access this situation. I think the exploration of that technology and the use of the technology is really, kind of a bonus in this time period, is teaching our kids what's out there, right? What works for you? What kind of systems do you like? So that's definitely something to be working on.
Now, when it comes to accommodations and all the things that are on the IEPs, there are things we cannot do, like preferential seating necessarily. But it makes me wonder, how much of a break are we getting when it comes to not following the IEP and not doing what it says? Like what options do teachers have if it's just not possible?
Well, once the spring was over and we were in just emergency services during that time, the federal government determined that IEPs needed to be implemented as written starting in this school year. Which timelines remain the same, everything remains the same, which is obviously challenging. But so IEP goals need to be implemented, accommodations, modifications, all of that need to be implemented. Now, obviously, an accommodation for, preferential seating isn't going to be something that we can do, or that a student even needs, because there is no seating. Now, does that mean that maybe, I don't know, you could stretch it and say they need to be in a breakout room more, things like that. So the answer is both. The answer is that an IEP has to be implemented along the legal criteria. Having said that, there are only so many things that can be done in a virtual setting. So that I don't anticipate that's going to come back in any way to say, oh, you didn't do preferential seating when there wasn't any seating. Now, if a teacher says, I'm now working on the math goal because it's too hard for me to teach math over Zoom, that would be a problem. That needs to be implemented as it's written. Or if they say, his annual IEP's due in November, but I'm not going to hold it till we get back in school. Like, we can't do any of that. We have to follow all those timelines.
What types of complaints have you heard from teachers that they've received from parents regarding IEPs and following the IEP? Have parents been grumbling about the situation?
I mean, the biggest complaint, and I probably, I don't know, have sat in 30 IEPs now about this, is that the parents will say, this type of learning doesn't work for my student. What are you going to do? And so we have a lot of IEPs like that, and we're like, I know it doesn't work. I mean, what can we do? I live in a state that has very strict criteria, and in a county who dictates, what we can do and what we can't do. So, parents will say, we need somebody to come to the home. We can't. I mean, we just can't. It's not like, oh, we wish, we just can't. So we get a lot of that. That's probably the most common complaint. And most parents know when they're saying it, like, we get, like, there's really nothing you can do, but you need to do something, is how a lot of parents are feeling. So I think that is probably the biggest complaint. And then they will often say, how are you going to make up this? Like, how are you going to, once we're back, how are you going to make up all of this time? And the answer is, we're not, because we've been providing the service. It's just, we understand the situation isn't ideal, but it's not ideal for everybody. So those are probably, the two most common parent complaints. And then I think for special ed teachers, which is, I know for general ed teachers, I think the biggest complaint is that, it's really tough to get kids to show up, even in environments where parents are really involved and they are able to put that, energy into it. It's just hard to get kids to show up every day and sit in front of a computer. It just is. And so I teachers struggle with that all the time. And again, it's another one of those, like, I know, I mean, we can't do a lot with that. Now, having said that, there are reinforcement programs that we put in place and even goals we develop to be able to help, students be able to sort of access less preferred time so that we can focus, kind of help them learn that skill to do something that, is hard or that isn't preferred.
Right. And I can imagine that parents are concerned that their student is at a disadvantage, even more so than the regular ed students. But from what I've seen, most of the students are kind of at a disadvantage in general. So it's, it's not an ideal situation for the majority of students, especially because the class sizes have remained the same. If it was a purely online school, they would have structured it differently so that there could be more individualization of instruction, since we can't have one-on-one. But I can see why that can be frustrating, though, because they already feel like maybe their student has been behind and now they're going to fall even more behind. But then that also makes me wonder, okay, so as a parent, I might be at home with my child. So is there any of the responsibility from the IEPs that can be transferred to parents? Can we legally do that since they're there with their student, maybe?
We can't legally do that. That's one of the clear laws that the IDEA, which is the federal law that guides special education, says that you can't hold the parent responsible for a deficit that a school district has determined that child has to be able to access their parents to be teachers, even during a pandemic and when they're home, with their child. And in some ways, we don't necessarily want to turn over role to a parent because they're not educated in what we do and things like that. But I know it's a really big frustration area for teachers where they say, why won't they get why should they get the kid to come to the Zoom, and why can't, what is going on, like whatever. And I agree. I see both sides of the coin on this. I remind teachers that it's really hard what parents are doing. A lot of our parents are working full-time jobs. They're, have multiple kids that are on multiple Zooms at multiple times of the day. And it's hard. I mean, it is hard. I have, older kids who monitor themselves, and it's still hard to keep up with. If you have, a first grader, a third grader, and a sixth grader, and you're trying to monitor all that, that is hard, and hold down your full-time job. So, that's why I think the more that I like to say, like, the more we look at all of this from a place of kind of grace and acceptance, is that idea that parents are in most cases, parents are doing the best they can and teachers are doing the best they can. I think if we could all sort of like land in that place, then it would go a little bit, smoother, because then everybody understands that really you're doing the best that you can. The same with teachers, where they might have their own kids at home that they're trying to, have them be educated and then teach other kids at the same time. It's not great. That's what I say in a lot of meetings. Like, it's just not great.
In what ways? Okay, so I remember the SPED students at my school. I don't know if, at all schools they do this. They have a separate class, like maybe like a study skills or something, where they help with them with their executive functioning, because SPED students in particular need help with staying organized. And, not only do you have 6 teachers, but some of those 6 teachers may have 6 different places to turn in assignments or get assignments. What for new teachers coming in feeling helpless, how can they support their caseload students? I mean, are they going to pull them out of class, or what do you suggest?
Well, it's a great question. And when you're looking at that particular issue, any issue, the way that as special educators, we really need to do it is we kind of need to look at where are they currently functioning in the skills that we're talking about. And then what are their goals in that particular skill area? So say executive functioning. And then that kind of guides us into what services and supports would look like. So you can have a student who the only executive functioning issue they have is writing down homework. That's just their thing. They can't seem to get it together. So they might have a goal about writing down homework. So that would then look different than a student who just, from the minute they walk in the door, things are falling out of their backpack. They don't know which class they're supposed to be in. They don't write things down. They can't remember anything, that kind of kid. That's a different kind of student. And the way you would kind of know that, even, like if you're a gen ed teacher and you're looking at their IEP, you should be able to know that from the Iep Goals, which you should have a copy of. And so again, a student with severe executive functioning issues would be a student that has probably an attending goal, a following instructions goal, a turning in work goal, a beginning work goal, like all those areas that go into executive functioning. And so then those kids are kids that I find it's more effective to pull out to do some one-on-one work with, because it is just like anything else, just like reading or writing or math. Executive functioning is a skill deficit. And so if you don't know how to do it, you need it to be taught. Now, some kids walk into the world and they just have it, right? They just, they've got their systems, they love to highlight, and they've got their, the whole thing. And then you just have kids who just they don't come by it naturally, but they can be taught different skills. And having said that, virtual learning is a great time because we have a little bit of leeway in what we're teaching. It's a great time to be teaching that. You can do whole lessons on just, starting an assignment. What does that look like? What do we need to do? What do we need to have ready? All of that, how do we finish an assignment? All of those things that go into executive functioning, it's a really nice time to work on. So I think the biggest thing to remember around that skill is that these are not kids who are just going to learn it if we keep throwing them into the situation, right? It doesn't matter how many times they try. If they don't have a skill set to be able to do it successfully, to be able to do it. So, in any skills like that, I always encourage teachers to think about it from compare it to teaching reading, writing, or math, because that in our brains, we can break that down. Oh, right. If a kid doesn't know how to read, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure out where don't they know, what skills are they missing? Is it letter recognition? What is it? Okay, now I'm going to build plans on that, right? So we understand that. But when it's more like executive functioning, behavior, things like that, we think, well, they should just know it. They should just figure it out. That's what kids do, right? But a lot of kids don't. So they need it to be taught.
Yeah, even based on, and I don't have specific SPED kids with IEPs in my current classrooms, but I still have students who just can't get started on an assignment either. And I know a lot of it is also attributed to the online learning environment, because a lot of times we would get started on an assignment together in class and then they'd finish it at home. Now, during their asynchronous time, they're kind of on their own, and we have to trust them that they're actually going to do it and not go play Among Us or some other video game, and that they're going to, when they do start the assignment, that they're going to remember what the assignment was even about. And
so hard.
Yeah, there's just too many barriers and too many distractions, or if they have to take care of, somebody in their house. Now, you have been coaching new teachers and even veteran teachers for a while. And what have been the biggest frustrations with the IEP process now during distance learning?
For teachers?
Yeah, for the SPED teachers.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest frustrations is just that they don't feel like they have enough information, that it's very hard to gather the data that we're used to being able to gather. So when I train new teachers, I go through a system that's pretty step by step. And so the first piece of that system is they need to collect data. They need to know the present levels or where that student is currently functioning in all the different areas. And that really is the foundation for the rest of the IEP. It's really critical because it tells you where you're going. And that's really hard when you're not with them. It's hard to collect accurate data. And in some areas, it's impossible. So, I mean, you can collect data on pretty concrete academic goals. You can assess through virtual assessment. But you can't really assess on behavior goals, and you can't assess on even executive functioning goals, and you can't assess on social goals and all of those. And so it's just frustrating. And so, teachers are like, what do we do? And again, it's the same answer, like, there's just not much we can do, right? I mean, my feeling is that once we get back in school, it's going to take a while, and then we're all just going to have to readjust what's going on. So, the IEPs are written and appropriate for where we are right this minute, but that doesn't mean that they're going to stay appropriate once we're all back into back into a normal school day. But that's all that we have. So I think that is probably the most frustrating piece with the IEP. I think that the holding of the IEP meeting has actually been going really well virtually. That the meeting actually kind of facilitates nicely in this. It's easier. It's way easier for parents to be able to schedule it in, which is always, challenging because they have to take off work and all of that. And it's definitely one of the pieces where I think this may be something that's worth, keeping because, if a parent's at work, all they have to do is schedule out an hour as opposed to the drive time and leaving and doing all of that, and they can be a part of it. So we've actually seen much higher rates of in parent involvement in IEPs. So that's been really nice. And I think that's true for all the providers that travel between schools and, are kind of all over the place. It's just easier to jump onto, a meeting virtually than to be in person. So that's maybe one of the high points.
Silver lining.
Yeah.
Now, I know that for teachers who are in their practicum right now and teachers coming out, one of their big frustrations is that they don't really learn how to write an IEP. They just learn about educational and special education theory, but you have something that actually really helps them out. You have a system, a course that's a clear-cut way for them to learn this process. And for me, when I take a course, I want something where I can look over the shoulder and see exactly how somebody else does it. And also I want a shortcut because I don't want to have to, kind of crawl my way through the mess. And usually I would get that kind of coaching in person. If we were still in school, I'd have another SPED teacher who would be there and say, okay, this is why I do this on the IEP. And you can ask them a million questions, but you have a system, you have a course that's so perfect for right now when new SPED teachers are drowning with IEPs and spending all of their free time on it. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah. Actually, I just was talking to a woman today who in the last 2 weeks had 18 IEPs. And she's a brand new teacher. We were talking because she was going through my course. And so yes, that is a reality that's really, really tough, is that and throughout my 30 years, I did the stumbling my way through, right? Like you talked about, like, I didn't know what I was doing and I didn't know who to go to. And it was just kind of me figuring it all out. And one of the things that I realized when I started coaching new teachers is that I think what we do wrong in some cases is we throw all this information at teachers, assuming that's going to be helpful. Like, here's all my knowledge. Here's everything you need to know. And what I've found, right? And what I found is that that's the absolute opposite of what they need. And so this system that I put in place is the system that I use when I train as I train new special ed teachers. And I like to say it's bite-sized information. It's just enough information that you need without being too much. So the program actually walks teachers through all the different parts of the IEP. It has done for you documents that you can use as you're moving through. And so, like you said, it really is sort of that mentor teacher that's kind of there for you with all your information without having that person there. Even in best case, a lot of times special ed teachers are kind of their own island within the school that they work in, because maybe they're the only special ed teacher or one or two, and everybody's so busy. And so this really gives them that level of support. So each module is a standalone module. And so the teachers can go back and forth as much as they want. So like one of the modules is on writing Iep goals. And so a lot of the teachers use that module every single time they're writing the goals until they get really, really good and smooth at it. And so it has a whole system where all you have to do basically is plug in information. And so that was really the design. The purpose of the course was ease. Nothing to make things harder. And so my hope was that they would be able to take the course, pop into a module anytime that they needed it, and be like, oh, okay, I follow these steps. Now I know what to do, because we just need to make it more simple for special ed teachers. That's really what it comes down to. Anything to take out all the extra noise and just keep them focused on what it is that they need.
Yeah, because they shouldn't be giving up every evening and the weekends writing IEPs. They're entitled to their personal life and all of that just as much as everybody else. So I love that this system, especially for new teachers who try to do everything because they don't really know what to focus on. That's what I really love about this course. Now, where can my listeners find this?
Well, so you can go to iepsuntangled.com. That's the name of the course, is Ieps Untangled. And just go to iepsuntangled.com. You can find it at my website, throughout my website at learntoteachwithbrandie.com. I also have a Facebook page where you can link through to the course as well, and that's New Teacher Support at Facebook. So any of those places, and then, you can always just contact me, and I'm happy to answer questions or, talk through any of these ideas and see if it's a good fit for you.
And I will put all of that information in the show notes for you guys so you can easily go check out Brandie's course. And I know that if you're a new SPED teacher, you didn't get enough training on this, so you should sign up for that. So you have time over winter break at your leisure so that come second semester, you are ready to rock and roll. Well, thank you so much, Brandie. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was just going to say, and I agree with you that, teachers should not have to spend every night and every weekend writing IEPs. So this is the goal, to simplify, to make sure that you have time to enjoy your family and do the things you want to do.
Exactly. I love this. Thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. I love having you here, and this is such a timely topic. Thank you so much, and I hope that we will see you soon.
Oh, thank you, and have a happy holiday.
You too. So I hope you got some value out of that interview with Brandie. I know that I did, and I can't wait to share this with the SPED teachers that are at my school, as well as co-teachers, because I think that this is really valuable information. If you have students with disabilities in your classroom, there's just so much here for you to learn from and to take with you coming into second semester. And especially if you are a brand new special ed teacher, I think you definitely need to not only really digest and maybe even listen to this episode again, but I would definitely check out Brandie's course on Ieps Untangled. It's really easy and valuable, and the fact that it takes you step by step is something that I think would make you feel better, because then you wouldn't have to bug another SPED teacher about IEPs. Like, why are you doing this? What am I supposed to do next? You would have this course as your guide forever until you just do it naturally. So it's definitely a shortcut, and I think that it would save you hours and give you back so much time. So be sure to check that out in the show notes. Thanks again so much, you guys. Happy 100th episode to all of us, and I will see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. Love this episode? Head over to Apple Podcast or Google Play to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.